How can one careless joke at the dinner table turn not just my boyfriend, but his family and friends against me in a single night? What begins as playful arrogance spirals into public shame, secret alliances, and a cold, legal reckoning I never saw coming. Can I still call him the villain when everyone else already decided it was me? The breaking moment wasn't his reaction, it was everyone else's. I expected awkward smiles, maybe a few laughs, but instead, his best friend stood up and pushed his chair back, like he couldn't sit through it. Then his mom, who'd always been warm to me, looked down at her plate and didn't touch her food again. My boyfriend didn't argue. He calmly pulled out his phone and opened a group chat titled Apartment Move Out, created 2 days earlier, with his brother and a cousin. I realized he'd been preparing for this kind of moment, not because he was paranoid, but because he'd been seeing a pattern I refused to admit. And when I reached for his hand, he moved it away like it wasn't mine to hold anymore. But let me back up. My name is Evadne Leclair, and I thought I was being clever that night at dinner. I thought I was showing everyone how desirable I was, how lucky Simon was to have me. Instead, I destroyed everything with one stupid joke. It started as a normal Sunday dinner at the Dorsey family home. Simon's mum, Linda, had made her famous pot roast, and the dining room smelled like rosemary and garlic. The table was set with her good china, the kind she only brought out for special occasions. Simon sat beside me, quiet as usual, cutting his meat into precise little squares like he always did. His brother Ben was across from us with his wife Sarah, and their kids Ellie and Max were arguing over who got the bigger dinner roll. Then there was Jax, Geordie Halperin, but everyone called him Jax. Simon's oldest friend, the guy who could make anyone laugh, who always had the best stories from his latest adventure. He was sitting at the end of the table, telling some ridiculous story about getting lost in downtown Portland, and everyone was hanging on every word. "So there I am," Jax said, gesturing with his fork, standing in the middle of Pioneer Square in my pajamas because I thought I was sleepwalking, but it turns out I was just really, really drunk. Everyone laughed. Even Linda, who usually didn't approve of Jax's drinking stories, was smiling. I felt this weird pang of jealousy watching Simon laugh at his friend's joke. When was the last time Simon had laughed like that at something I said? That's when I decided to be funny, to show everyone that I could be just as entertaining as Jax. "You know," I said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Simon's lucky I keep him around. I mean, I have options." The laughter died instantly. Sarah stopped mid-chew. Ben put down his water glass with a little clink that sounded deafening in the sudden silence. Linda's smile faded like someone had turned off a light switch. But I wasn't done. God help me, I wasn't done. "I'm just saying," I continued, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks but pushing forward anyway. "A girl like me doesn't have to settle. Right, Jax? You'd agree I'm quite the catch." I looked directly at Jax when I said it, and something passed between us, something that had been building for months during our secret coffee meetings, our late-night text conversations that I deleted before Simon could see them. Jax's eyes met mine, and for a split second, he smirked. That same cocky smile he'd given me last week, when he'd touched my hand across the table at the downtown bistro and said, "I deserve someone more exciting than Simon." That's when Jax stood up, not to defend me or laugh along with my joke, but to distance himself from the disaster I'd just created. He pushed his chair back so hard it scraped against the hardwood floor. "I think I should go," he said, not looking at anyone. "Thanks for dinner, Mrs. Dorsey." Linda nodded stiffly. "Of course, dear. Drive safe." Simon watched his best friend leave without saying a word. Then he pulled out his phone, and that's when I saw the group chat. Apartment Move Out, with Ben and his cousin Mike as participants, created 2 days ago. 2 days ago, before tonight's dinner, before my joke. "Simon," I whispered, reaching for his hand. He moved it away like my touch burned him. "We'll talk at home," he said quietly. The rest of dinner passed in excruciating silence. Linda cleared plates with sharp, efficient movements. Ben helped Sarah get the kids ready to leave early. Nobody looked at me directly, but I could feel their judgment like a weight pressing down on my chest. When we finally got to Simon's car, I tried to explain. "It was just a joke," I said as he started the engine. "You know I didn't mean anything by it." Simon adjusted his rearview mirror, checked his blind spots, and pulled out of his parents' driveway with the same methodical precision he brought to everything else in his life. "Was it?" he asked. "Was it what?" "A joke." I stared at his profile in the dim light from the dashboard. His jaw was set in that way that meant he was thinking, processing, filing information away in that organized mind of his. Simon was a software engineer, and he approached problems the same way he approached code, systematically, logically, with careful attention to patterns and bugs. Of course it was a joke. What else would it be? He didn't answer. We drove the rest of the way home in silence, and when we got to our apartment, Simon went straight to the bedroom and came back out with a pillow and blanket. "I'm sleeping on the couch tonight," he said. "Simon, come on, don't be ridiculous." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Disappointment, yes, but something else. Something that looked almost like pity. "You embarrassed me in front of my family," he said. "You flirted with my best friend at my mother's dinner table. And when I checked my phone to see if I had any messages, you looked at my screen like you had a right to see what was there. I wasn't. You were. And that tells me you're looking for something. Some sign that I'm planning to leave you, or that I don't trust you, or that I'm talking about you behind your back." He shook out the blanket and spread it across the couch cushions. "The question is, why would you be looking for that unless you already know you've given me a reason?" I wanted to argue, to defend myself, to explain that he was reading too much into everything. But the words stuck in my throat because somewhere, in a part of my mind I didn't want to examine too closely, I knew he was right. I had given him a reason. Several reasons, actually. The coffee dates with Jax that had started innocent, but become something else. The way I'd been staying late at work, not because I had extra projects, but because I was texting someone who made me feel alive in a way Simon never had. The lies I'd been telling myself about what I deserved, what I was entitled to, what constituted real happiness. But I wasn't ready to admit any of that. Not to Simon, and definitely not to myself. "Fine," I said. "Sleep on the couch. But you're being dramatic." Simon plugged his phone into the charger on the side table and set it face down. Another new habit. When had he started doing that? "Maybe," he said, "but I don't think I am." I woke up the next morning to the sound of Simon's shower running and the smell of coffee he'd made without offering me any. When I shuffled to the kitchen in my robe, there was a single cup in the sink and a note on the counter. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." He'd never left me notes before. Simon was the type to send a quick text, or just assume I'd figure out his schedule. The formality of it felt like a warning shot. I spent the day at my administrative assistant job at Henderson Marketing, trying to focus on spreadsheets and client files, but my mind kept drifting back to dinner. Had I really been that inappropriate? Was I overreacting, or was Simon? Around lunch, I got a text from my best friend Marlene. "Heard about last night, you okay?" My stomach dropped. How had Marlene heard about dinner? I called her immediately. "Who told you?" I asked without preamble. "Sarah posted something vague on Facebook about family dinners and knowing your worth." Then Ben commented with a facepalm emoji. It wasn't hard to figure out. Marlene's voice was careful, like she was trying not to set off a bomb. "What happened, Evie?" I gave her the sanitized version. A joke that fell flat, Simon being oversensitive, everyone overreacting to nothing. Marlene said when I finished. "And this had nothing to do with Jax." My heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "Come on, Evie. You've been talking about him for months. How funny he is. How he really listens to you. How he makes you feel appreciated. I'm not blind." Marlene was the one who'd encouraged me to live a little when I'd first mentioned my coffee dates with Jax. She'd said I deserved to feel excited about someone, that Simon was too boring, too predictable, too satisfied with mediocrity. She'd been the one to suggest I was settling, but now her voice carried a note of concern that made me defensive. "It's not like that," I said. "Isn't it?" I hung up without answering. That evening, Simon came home after 10 o'clock with takeout Chinese food for one. He ate standing up at the kitchen counter while scrolling through his laptop, and when I tried to start a conversation about our day, he gave me one-word answers. "How was work?" "Fine." "Are you still upset about last night?" "Yep." "Simon, can we please talk about this like adults?" He looked up from his laptop then, and I saw he had a spreadsheet open. Not work stuff. I could see columns labeled date, time, location, and notes. "What's that?" I asked. Simon closed the laptop. "Nothing important." But I'd seen enough to know it wasn't nothing. The dates went back months. There were entries for times I'd said I was working late, times I'd gone out with Marlene, times I'd claimed to be running errands. He was tracking me. My own boyfriend was keeping a record of my activities, like I was some kind of suspect. "Are you spying on me?" I demanded. "I'm paying attention," he said. "There's a difference." "That's creepy, Simon. That's controlling and weird and accurate," he interrupted. "Which is what bothers you." I wanted to argue, but the words died in my throat because I could see more of the spreadsheet now. Dates that corresponded to my meetings with Jax. Times I'd said I was at the grocery store, but had actually been at the bistro downtown. Evenings I'd claimed Marlene needed me, but had spent texting someone who wasn't Simon. "You're being paranoid," I said, but it sounded weak even to me. "Am I?" Simon opened the laptop again and turned it toward me. "March 15th, you said you were working late on the Morrison account, but Henderson Marketing posted on Instagram that day about everyone leaving early for a team happy hour. You're in the background of 3 different photos at Murphy's pub." My mouth went dry. I didn't stay for the whole thing. March 22nd, girls' night with Marlene, but Marlene posted a story from her date with David at the movie theater. She tagged him and mentioned it was their first night out in weeks because her best friend had been busy with other things. I felt like I was suffocating. "You're stalking my friend's social media." "I'm fact-checking the stories you tell me, and they don't add up, Evadne. They haven't added up for months." He knew. Maybe not all the details, maybe not about Jack specifically, but he knew I'd been lying. The careful way he said my full name instead of the nickname he'd used for 3 years told me everything I needed to know about how much damage I'd already done. "Simon," I started, but he held up a hand. "I'm going to bed," he said. "We can talk more tomorrow." "You're sleeping on the couch again?" "No," he said, closing the laptop and tucking it under his arm. "You are." I spent that night on our couch, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so fast. The apartment felt different somehow, like Simon had already started the process of removing me from it. His books were gone from the coffee table. The spare phone charger he kept by the couch had disappeared. Little things, but they added up to a clear message. He was creating distance. The next morning, Ben showed up while Simon was getting ready for work. I answered the door in my pajamas, and Ben looked surprised to see me. "Oh, hi, Evadne, is Simon here?" "He's in the shower. Do you want to come in?" Ben hesitated, which stung. He'd never hesitated before. "Actually, I'll just wait in the car. Can you tell him I'm here?" "Ben, about Sunday night." "It's not my business," he said quickly. "Just tell Simon I'm here, okay?" I watched from the window as Simon came out 10 minutes later carrying a duffel bag I'd never seen before. He and Ben talked for a few minutes by Ben's car, and I saw Ben hand Simon what looked like a key. Then Simon came back inside, went to our bedroom, and came out with another bag. Where are you going? I asked. Staying with Ben for a few days. Give us both some space to think. Simon, this is ridiculous. We can work this out. He paused at the door. Can we? Because I've been thinking about it all night, and I'm not sure we can. I'm not sure you want to. Of course I want to work it out. Do you? He shifted the bag to his other shoulder. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been working on an exit strategy for months. The late nights, the lies, the way you've been picking fights about everything I do, and then Sunday night, flirting with my best friend in front of my family, like you wanted to make sure everyone knew you had other options. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out, because the truth was, it had been exactly like that. I had wanted everyone to know I had other options. I had wanted to make Simon feel insecure, to make him fight for me, to prove that I was worth fighting for. But instead of fighting, he was leaving, and instead of feeling victorious, I felt terrified. I'll be back for more of my things later this week, Simon said. We can talk then. Really talk. About what we both want and whether this is fixable. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and I was alone in an apartment that suddenly felt enormous and empty. I called in sick to work and spent the day going through Simon's things, looking for more evidence of his planning. I found a folder in his desk labeled Important Documents that contained copies of our lease, utility bills, and bank statements. Everything was highlighted and organized, like he was building a case. My phone buzzed with a text from Jax. Heard about the other night. You okay? For the first time in days, someone was asking if I was okay, instead of judging me for what I'd done. I texted back, Not really. Can we talk? Coffee in an hour, usual place. I said yes before I could think about whether it was a good idea. The usual place was the little bistro downtown where Jax and I had been meeting for months. It started innocently enough. He'd mentioned wanting to try their coffee, and I'd offered to show him where it was. But somewhere along the way, our casual coffee dates had become something else. Something I told myself was just friendship, but knew was more. Jax was already there when I arrived, sitting at our regular table by the window. He looked up when I walked in, and that familiar flutter hit my stomach. This was the problem with Jax. He made me feel like I was 25 again, like I was interesting and desirable and worth pursuing. Simon made me feel safe and comfortable, but Jax made me feel alive. You look terrible, he said as I sat down. Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear. He signaled the waitress for 2 coffees. I mean it, though. Are you sleeping? I told him about Simon's spreadsheet, about him staying at Ben's, about the way his whole family had looked at me Sunday night. Jax listened without interrupting, which was one of the things I loved about him. Simon always wanted to solve problems immediately, to fix things and move on. Jax just listened. So what are you going to do? He asked when I finished. I don't know. Try to fix things, I guess. Jack stirred sugar into his coffee and didn't meet my eyes. Is that what you want? To fix things? It was a loaded question, and we both knew it. For months, Jax had been telling me I deserved better than Simon, that I was too vibrant, too interesting, too alive to be stuck with someone who took me for granted. He'd never said outright that I should leave Simon, but the implication was always there. I don't know, I admitted, because if you're not happy... I never said I wasn't happy. You didn't have to. Jax reached across the table and touched my hand. Evie, I've been watching you for months. You light up when you talk about anything except Simon. You're miserable, and you're pretending you're not. His hand was warm on mine, and I didn't pull away. I should have, but I didn't. It's not that simple, I said, isn't it? We sat like that for a moment, his hand covering mine, and I felt that familiar pull, the temptation to lean into this feeling, to let Jax convince me that what I felt for him was real and important, and worth destroying my life for. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Marlene. Whatever you're doing, stop. Sarah just posted a photo of you and Jax at the bistro on her Instagram story. Everyone can see you holding hands. My blood went cold. I yanked my hand away from Jax and looked around the restaurant. I didn't see Sarah, but that didn't mean she hadn't been there. The bistro was small and popular, especially with people from our social circle. I have to go, I said, standing up so fast I knocked over my coffee cup. Evie, wait! But I was already walking away, my heart pounding as I realized how stupid I'd been. How careless. Simon's family was already suspicious of me, and now there was photographic evidence of me holding hands with his best friend the day after he moved out. I drove home in a panic, checking my phone at every red light to see if the story had spread further. By the time I got to the apartment, I had 3 missed calls from my mother and a text from Ben that just said, "Really?" My mother called again as I was walking up the stairs. "Evadne Leclair," she said in her sternest voice, "what is this nonsense I'm hearing about you and some boy?" "It's not nonsense, Mom. It's complicated." "Complicated how? You're either cheating on Simon or you're not." My mother had always liked Simon. She thought he was stable and dependable and good for me. She'd been thrilled when we moved in together, convinced he was going to propose soon. The idea that I might be sabotaging the relationship clearly horrified her. "I'm not cheating," I said, but it sounded hollow even to me. "Then why are there pictures of you holding hands with another man while your boyfriend is staying at his brother's house?" "How do you even know about that?" "Linda called me. She's worried about Simon, and frankly so am I. That boy has been nothing but good to you, Evadne. He's kind and responsible, and he loves you. What more do you want?" What did I want? It was the question I'd been avoiding for months. Simon was everything my mother said he was. He was kind and responsible, and he loved me. But he was also predictable, and quiet, and satisfied with a life that felt small to me. He was content with Sunday dinners at his parents' house and Netflix nights, and the same vacation spot every year. He never surprised me, never challenged me, never made me feel like I was living instead of just existing. "I want to feel excited about my life," I said. "Is that so terrible?" "Not terrible," my mother said, "but if you're not excited about the life you've built with Simon, maybe you should figure out why instead of running around with his friends." She hung up and I was alone again in the too quiet apartment. That evening, I got a text from Simon. "Can we talk tomorrow? There are some things we need to discuss." I spent the night rehearsing what I would say, how I would explain that the photo wasn't what it looked like, that Jax was just being a good friend, that I was sorry for the joke at dinner and ready to work on our relationship. But when Simon showed up the next evening, he wasn't alone. Ben was with him, and they both looked like they were attending a funeral. "We need to talk," Simon said, sitting down across from me at our kitchen table. "Okay," I said. "I'm ready to talk." Simon pulled out his phone and opened Instagram. Sarah's story was still up, and the photo was even worse than I'd imagined. Jax and I were leaning toward each other across the table, his hand covering mine, both of us smiling in a way that looked intimate and secretive. The timestamp showed it was taken yesterday afternoon, less than 24 hours after Simon had moved out. "I've been getting messages about this all day," Simon said. "From my co-workers, from friends, from family members. People asking if I know my girlfriend is cheating on me with my best friend." "Simon, it's not what it looks like." "Stop." His voice was quiet but firm. "Just stop. I'm tired of the lies, Evadne. I'm tired of pretending I don't know what's been happening." Ben shifted uncomfortably in his chair but didn't leave. His presence felt like a statement. Simon wasn't facing this alone anymore. "What do you think has been happening?" I asked. Simon pulled out a manila folder and set it on the table between us. "I think you've been having an affair with Jax for months. I think you've been lying to me about where you go and who you're with. I think Sunday night wasn't a joke. It was you testing the waters to see how people would react if you left me for him." The folder was thick, and I could see the edges of printed emails and photos sticking out. My hands were shaking as I reached for it. "Don't," Simon said. "You don't want to see what's in there." But I opened it anyway. The first page was a printout of text messages between Jax and his roommate, talking about the situation with Evie and how Simon's going to find out eventually. The second page was a series of Instagram photos showing me at places I'd told Simon I wasn't. The third page was a timeline of my lies, cross-referenced with social media posts and witness accounts. It was thorough and damning and completely accurate. "How did you get these?" I whispered. Jax's roommate Jared felt guilty, Ben said. "He brought everything to Simon yesterday." I looked up at Simon, and the expression on his face broke something inside me. He wasn't angry anymore. He just looked tired and sad and done. "I loved you," he said. "I really did. But I can't love someone who lies to me every day. I can't build a life with someone who's already planning her exit strategy." "Simon, please." "I'm moving out this weekend," he said. "The lease is in both our names, but I've talked to the landlord. You can stay if you want, but you'll need to qualify for the rent on your own." He stood up, and Ben stood with him. They moved like a coordinated unit, like they'd planned this conversation down to the minute. "What about us?" I asked. "What about 3 years together?" Simon paused at the door. "What about them? You threw them away the first time you lied to me about where you were going. Everything since then has just been clean-up." After they left, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the folder full of evidence. Every lie I'd told, every secret meeting, every moment I'd chosen Jax over Simon. It was all there in black and white, organized and documented like a case file. My phone buzzed with a text from Jax. "Heard Simon came by. Are you okay?" I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. "Did you know your roommate was going to give him everything?" "What do you mean?" "The texts, Jax, the photos, the timeline. Did you know Jared was building a case against us?" There was a long pause before he responded. "We should talk, but not at the bistro, too public." "Your place?" Another pause. "Maybe that's not a good idea right now. People are watching." People were watching. The reality of that hit me like a slap. This wasn't just between Simon and me anymore. This was public. This was gossip spreading through our entire social circle, turning me into the villain in a story everyone would be talking about for months. I was about to lose everything, and the man I'd risked it all for was already trying to distance himself from the wreckage. The next few days passed in a blur of humiliation and damage control. I went to work and tried to focus on my administrative tasks, but I could feel my coworkers whispering behind my back. Henderson Marketing was a small company, and gossip traveled fast. By Wednesday, even my boss Patricia was giving me sympathetic looks that felt more like pity. "Everything okay at home?" she asked when I made my third mistake on a simple filing task. "Fine," I lied. "Just tired." But nothing was fine. Simon had started moving his things out, coming by the apartment when I was at work, and taking a little more each time. First his books, then his kitchen gadgets, then his furniture. Each evening I came home to a slightly emptier space, like he was erasing himself from my life one piece at a time. Marlene was the only person still talking to me, but even she was keeping her distance. "I'm not judging you," she said when I called her crying Thursday night. "But this is messy, Evie, really messy. And I don't want to get caught in the middle." "You're my best friend." "I am. But I'm also married to David. And David works with Ben. And Ben is furious about what you did to Simon. I have to be careful here." Everyone had to be careful. Everyone was picking sides, and nobody was picking mine. Except my mother, who called Friday morning with what she thought was helpful advice. "You need to fight for him," she said. "Simon is a good man, and good men don't grow on trees. Whatever this nonsense with his friend is about, you need to end it and focus on saving your relationship." "Mum, it's too late for that." "It's never too late if you're willing to do the work, apologize, mean it, show him you're committed to changing." But I wasn't sure I was committed to changing. The truth was, even with everything falling apart, I still felt that flutter when Jax texted me. I still wondered what it would be like to be with someone who made me feel alive instead of just safe. That's when I made my biggest mistake. I called Jax and asked him to meet me at his apartment. If everyone already thought we were having an affair, and if Simon was already moving out, maybe it was time to stop pretending and see what Jax and I could really be together. His apartment was in a converted warehouse downtown, all exposed brick and industrial lighting, very different from the suburban comfort Simon and I had chosen together. Jax opened the door, wearing jeans and a t-shirt that showed off the tattoo on his forearm, and for a moment I remembered why I'd been so attracted to him in the first place. "This is crazy," he said as I walked in. "You coming here?" "Why? Everyone already thinks we're together." Jax closed the door but didn't move toward me. "That's the problem, Evie. Everyone thinks we're together, but we're not. Not really." Something cold settled in my stomach. "What do you mean?" "I mean, this has been fun, but it's gotten out of hand. I never meant for Simon to get hurt like this. I never meant for it to blow up your whole life." I stared at him. "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we should cool it for a while. Let things settle down." "Cool it?" My voice was getting higher. "Jax, I just lost my boyfriend and most of my friends because of this. Because of us." "There is no us," he said, and the words hit me like a physical blow. "There's been some flirting, and some coffee dates and some texting, but there's no us, Evie. There never was." I felt like I was falling. "You told me I deserved better than Simon. You said I was too interesting for him, too alive." "You are. But that doesn't mean you deserve me." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. This man I'd risked everything for, this man I'd thought was offering me a better life, was dismissing me like I was nothing. Like the months of secret meetings and intimate conversations and growing feelings had been nothing. "Get out," he said, "please, before someone sees you here." I left without another word, driving home through tears that made the streetlights blur into streaks of light. When I got to the apartment, Simon was there packing the last of his clothes. "How did it go?" he asked without looking up from his suitcase. "How did what go?" "Your meeting with Jax. Ben saw you going into his building." "Of course he had. Of course someone was watching." I was probably the most watched person in our entire social circle. Every movement catalogued and reported back to Simon's army of supporters. "It's over," I said. "Whatever you think was happening between us, it's over." Simon finally looked at me. "Because he ended it, or because you did?" I didn't answer, which was answer enough. "He was never going to leave his life for you, Evadne. You know that, right? Guys like Jax don't leave their lives for anyone. They just take what they want and move on." "Like you're doing." "No," Simon said, zipping up his suitcase. "I'm leaving because you already left. You left months ago, emotionally, if not physically. I'm just making it official." He carried his suitcase to the door, then turned back one more time. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry it ended this way. I really did love you. I would have done anything to make you happy if you'd just told me what you needed." After he left, I sat on the floor of our empty bedroom and tried to figure out how I'd gotten here. A week ago, I'd had a boyfriend who loved me, friends who included me, a family who was proud of me. Now I had none of those things. My phone buzzed with a notification. Someone had tagged me in a Facebook post. It was Sarah, Ben's wife, sharing an article about emotional infidelity with the caption, "Some people don't know what they have until they throw it away for something that was never real in the first place." The comments were already starting. Friends and family members weighing in with their opinions about loyalty and commitment and knowing your worth. Nobody was defending me. Nobody was suggesting there might be two sides to the story. I was the villain now, officially and publicly. The woman who cheated on the good guy with his best friend. The woman who didn't know what she had until she destroyed it. And the worst part was, they weren't wrong. I scrolled through the comments, each one a small knife twist. Linda Dorsey had liked the post, so had my own cousin Jennifer. Even people I barely knew were piling on, sharing their own stories about friends who'd been cheated on, expressing their sympathy for poor Simon. My mother called while I was reading the comments. "I just saw the Facebook post," she said. "Evadne, what have you done?" "I made a mistake, Mum. A huge mistake." "No, honey. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill or showing up late to work. This is a choice, a series of choices. And now you have to live with the consequences." She was right, but hearing it from my mother made it feel final somehow. If even she was disappointed in me, if even she thought I'd brought this on myself, then maybe I really was as terrible as everyone said. "What do I do now?" I asked. "You learn from this. You figure out why you sabotaged a good relationship, and you make sure you never do it again. But what about now? What about tomorrow and next week? And now you deal with the consequences. You apologize to the people you hurt. You take responsibility for what you did, and you start rebuilding your life. It's going to be hard, and it's going to take time, but you can do it." After we hung up, I tried to imagine what rebuilding would look like. Finding a new apartment I could afford on my own. Making new friends who didn't know my story. Starting over completely, carrying the weight of what I'd done like a scar everyone could see. It felt impossible. But as I sat in the empty apartment surrounded by the wreckage of my old life, I realized it was also the only choice I had left. The next morning, I woke up to a notification that Simon had changed his relationship status to single. Within an hour, he had 37 likes and a dozen comments offering support and sympathy. I was officially alone. Monday morning brought a knock on my door that changed everything. I was getting ready for work, trying to pretend my life wasn't completely falling apart, when someone knocked with the kind of authority that made my stomach drop. I opened the door to find a woman in a business suit holding an envelope. "Evadne Leclair?" "Yes?" "You're being served." She handed me the envelope and walked away before I could ask any questions. Inside was a letter from Simon's attorney, along with a thick packet of legal documents. The letter was brief and professional. Simon was terminating our joint lease, requesting removal from all shared financial accounts, and filing for a restraining order to prevent me from contacting him or his family. The restraining order was the part that made my hand shake. It included detailed documentation of what the lawyer called harassment and stalking behavior, including my attempts to contact Simon after he'd asked for space, my appearance at his workplace, and my continued presence at family gatherings where I wasn't welcome. But it was the evidence packet that really destroyed me. Simon had kept everything. Screenshots of every lie I'd told, cross-referenced with proof of where I'd actually been. Photos from social media showing me with Jax when I'd claimed to be somewhere else. Witness statements from friends and family members describing my behavior at various gatherings. Even recordings. Apparently, our state allowed one-party consent recording, and Simon had been documenting our conversations for weeks. There was a transcript of the dinner conversation where I'd made the joke about having options. Reading it in black and white, seeing my own words laid out like evidence in a criminal case, made me realize how cruel I'd sounded, how calculated and deliberate my cruelty had been. But the worst part was the financial documentation. Simon had been paying 70% of our rent and utilities. He'd been covering my car insurance, my phone bill, and my credit card payments. I'd been living beyond my means for years, supported by a man I'd been lying to and cheating on. Without Simon's income, I couldn't afford the apartment. I couldn't afford my car payments. I could barely afford groceries. I called in sick to work and spent the day on the phone with lawyers, trying to understand my options. The consultation fees alone were more than I made in a week, and every attorney I spoke to told me the same thing. Simon's case was airtight. He had documentation, witnesses, and evidence. I had nothing but excuses. "Your best bet is to comply with everything he's asking for." one lawyer told me. Don't fight the restraining order, don't contest the lease termination, and don't try to claim any shared assets. Cut your losses and move on. But what about my rights? What rights? You weren't married. You don't have children together. You have no legal claim to anything that's his, and he's not asking for anything that's yours. He just wants you out of his life. That afternoon, I got a call from my landlord. Simon had already spoken to him about terminating the lease. I had 30 days to either qualify for the full rent on my own or move out. Can I qualify? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Your income is less than half what we require for this unit, he said gently. I'm sorry, but no. I spent the evening packing, trying to figure out what I could afford to move and what I'd have to leave behind. Most of the furniture was Simon's, or things we'd bought together. The couch, the dining room table, the bed. All of it would stay. My mother called while I was wrapping dishes in newspaper. I heard about the legal papers, she said. How did you hear about that? Linda called me. She wanted me to know they're not doing this to be vindictive. They're doing it to protect Simon. Protect him from what? I'm not dangerous. Aren't you? My mother's voice was sad. Honey, you've been lying and manipulating and hurting people for months. Maybe you're not physically dangerous, but you've caused a lot of damage. I wanted to argue, but I was too tired, too defeated. Where am I supposed to go? I asked. You can stay here for a while, until you figure things out. Moving back in with my mother at 32 felt like the ultimate admission of failure. But it was the only option I had. The next few days were a blur of packing and paperwork and humiliation. I had to return the credit card Simon had been paying for. I had to transfer the utilities into my name for the final month. I had to arrange for movers I couldn't afford to take my things to storage. Marlene helped me pack, but even she was distant. I can't believe it got this bad, she said as we wrapped my clothes in garbage bags. You told me I deserved better than Simon, I reminded her. You said I should live a little. I said you should communicate with your boyfriend about what you needed. I didn't say you should cheat on him with his best friend. You knew about Jax. You knew I was meeting him for coffee. Marlene stopped packing and looked at me. I knew you had a crush. I thought you were just fantasizing, working through some feelings. I didn't know you were actually planning to leave Simon for him. I wasn't planning anything. It just happened. No, Evie, it didn't just happen. You made choices. Every time you lied about where you were going, every time you deleted a text message, every time you flirted with Jax in front of Simon, those were choices. She was right, but I wasn't ready to hear it. I was still looking for someone to blame, someone to share responsibility for the disaster my life had become. On my last night in the apartment, Simon came by to get the keys. I'd been dreading the moment, but when he walked in, he looked smaller somehow, tired and sad, but also relieved. How are you doing? He asked. Terrible, I said honestly. But I guess I deserve that. He nodded. I'm sorry it ended this way. I really am. Are you? I couldn't keep the bitterness out of my voice. Because it seems like you're getting everything you want. The apartment, the sympathy, the moral high ground. What I wanted was a girlfriend who loved me enough to be honest with me. What I wanted was a partner who would talk to me when she was unhappy instead of looking for someone else to make her feel better. Simon took the keys I held out to him. I never wanted any of this, Evadne. I just wanted us to work. After he left, I sat in the empty apartment one last time and tried to remember what it had felt like when we were happy. There had been happy times, lazy Sunday mornings, quiet dinners, comfortable silences that felt like contentment instead of boredom. But I'd thrown all of that away because I wanted excitement, because I wanted to feel desired and pursued and special, because I thought I deserved more than what I had. Now I had nothing, and Simon was free to find someone who would appreciate what he had to offer. Someone who wouldn't take his kindness for granted or mistake his steadiness for weakness. I locked the door behind me and left the keys on the kitchen counter. In the morning, I would move back in with my mother and start the long process of rebuilding my life from scratch. But tonight, I was finally ready to admit the truth. I had destroyed the best thing in my life because I was too selfish and immature to recognize its value. And now I would have to live with that knowledge forever. Starting over. Moving back to my childhood bedroom at 32 was humiliating. Sleeping on a pull-out couch amid my mother's quilting projects, waking to coffee and talk shows, a stark reminder I'd ruined my life over a man who fled to Seattle. My mother never said, "I told you so." She just made space and waited. One day, Jax's Facebook post announced his fresh start. I commented bitterly, then deleted it. Too late. Friends messaged, "Leave him alone." That night, Mum sat me down. "Stop acting like a victim. You cheated on Simon, hurt good people, and still blame everyone but yourself." Her words stung because they were true. I wrote apology letters to Simon, his family, friends, even Jax. No expectations, just responsibility. Most went unanswered. Simon's mother replied briefly, "Thank you. Simon is moving forward. I hope you can too." 6 months later, I had a studio apartment, a second job, new friends who knew me as I was becoming. Simon was dating a kind teacher. I felt relief, not jealousy. He deserved happiness. A year on, his wedding announcement showed him laughing, peaceful. I saved it as a reminder. Some people appreciate what others take for granted. I was still learning. But for the first time, I believed I could.